of the assignment again if you weren't able to post a little earlier this afternoon. So again, we're just getting acquainted with this new system. You're the first class kind of roll out in that, as I mentioned before, so bear with us. We have, for this class, fairly light listing overall, a lot of, not a heavy, a great deal of course material here. And we still want to kind of shake out where we are with the projects. And we've had, some issues that we need to address here as a team and go through and take a look at what our options might be. We have some impacts that have occurred, and so we'll talk about that in a moment. So I'll have discuss about other alternatives and options that we might have for some of the teams still or students that are looking for additional projects. Anybody have any questions you wanted to ask at the beginning of the course here? Okay. Let me ask right now, before I forget, one of the things that typically NGS asks for us to do is see if there'd be someone that may be interested to be kind of a representative for the cohort, for the student body. There's not often much to do, but there may be issues that the students may, you want to have, maybe something like around graduation or other requirements or things that you would like to, express, from you guys back to the school, or perhaps the other way around is that the school may have some information and they want to disseminate it through the student channel or get the input from the students. Occasionally, the school goes through certifications to maintain its ability to teach and certified degree programs. And a lot of times the certifying officials come in, and when they make the site visits, they like to talk to students. And so that often is sometimes a venue as well, where they reach out to the student members and look for volunteers or talk to representatives. And sometimes students will coordinate that amongst themselves. So if any of you are interested in serving in that capacity as quasi representative of the student body and perform those duties, as I said, there's not a lot to it, generally speaking, but if you are interested, let me know. If you would, send me an email or hang on afterwards after this course, and I'll be glad to talk to you. Or let me know if you're interested. Oh, by the way, I don't think there were too many. If any of you wanted to hang on last week, I cut it a little short because I wanted to get that list of team members out to you as soon as I could, and I jumped off afterwards, so hopefully I didn't cut anybody off that was waiting. I didn't have any immediate responses right after the course, so if you did have a question, I didn't mean to cut you off. So let's talk a little bit before we get into the course material that we have tonight, is to talk a little bit about the projects and where you are, because that really was the major focus that we had last time. And so let's start with, hey Dave, let's go with you guys. Has there been any changes, any impacts, any risks to your project at this point?
Nope, I don't think we have any issue. The only one concern my company had was NDAs for my team and for proprietary information. So that was the only thing that came up.
Okay. And by the way, when we go to charter signing, there are two documents that typically teams sign. First is the charter itself, and we don't introduce it right up front because we have this element of trying to figure out if we even have a good candidate before we go to actually making a contract out of it, or charter in our case. And we have, excuse me, in addition to the charter, are non-disclosure statements. And this is actually a signed document that members of the team, each one of you would sign, as well as myself as the representative of the school. And so if there's any type of provisions that we would need to know. In other words, sometimes, disguising the organization and not using its real name, or using approximate data, for instance, something like that, or having the champion provide the ability to redact, in other words, take, black it out, or remove it from any of the materials that may be going outside of the organization. So there's a lot of different techniques that we can address. And I don't know if I mentioned to you, we even had at one time a team that was working out of the NSA, which is the National Security Agency. And if you know anything about NSA, you basically have to have a clearance to eat in the cafeteria. And we had a team actually working on a project, and everybody was excuse me, in a cleared status and had been a part of that organization. And I also had a clearance, so and still restricted when we went in, of course. So we've done projects in that environment, which is highly restrictive. But there are some remedies we have. And then what you brought up, Dave, is that if you have policies and things that will be required from your own company's perspective, if you would share a copy of those non-disclosure statements or statements that the organization has, I'd like to be able to take a look at it as well and be sure that the school is not violating anything from your own policies. All right. So, and Ron, I guess, and Sam, how about the integration of you guys? How does this work out? Any issues logistically or things of that nature?
No issues at all from my end. It's pretty straightforward, and we were welcomed with open arms.
Oh, okay, excellent.
Yeah, we fit right in. I was going to say the same thing.
Okay, yeah, and Larry. Let's see, is Larry on? I saw he sent me just a note just a while ago. Okay. All right. Well, good. It sounds like you guys are off to the races. And now let's talk about the rest of you. Okay. Let's talk with Jay first. You've been in discussion with your team. Can you kind of just fill in the cohort what the situation is?
Initially, my commander, I was recommending him for the champion. And of course, I went through the chain of command to get that information to him, and he was a little hesitant. I had a face-to-face with him this morning. I've been a senior NCO. I have that privilege. So after I explained to him and let him look at it a little bit, he was on board with it. So we're good to go.
Oh, great. So now, is there anything, is he concerned about that, particularly about the project or how we handle information?
A little bit, being in the military, he didn't, I think initially he was thinking we were going to go in and pull up dirty laundry, and because of the readiness and situations that are going on right now, real world, he didn't want to have that impression or image that we weren't ready.
Yeah. It's really the case for everybody, right? Every organization's got some dirty laundry, and you don't want to air it. But everybody knows nobody's perfect, and so there usually are in-house secrets, and that's part of the things that most organizations will pertain. And really want to kind of emphasize, that we do take care of this information, and I want everybody to feel whenever they get the information from this organization, when they start to work with your projects, it's often a very healthy rule, and I apply it even with my clients that I work with every time. I tell the team that we don't discuss this project outside our team. We are working for them. This is their, we're providing a product back to them. We don't need to be gossiping about them to anybody else or telling information about their performance levels to anyone else because it needs to stay within us. And also it allows us to ensure that somebody doesn't hear something, misinterpret something the team said, and then it gets back to the client or to the champion, and cause reason to have some rough waters. So it's just a good practice that, you know, when you get the information that you maintain it, you take care of it. And a lot of times when we do these projects, students will say, wow, I'd like to go work for you guys. You know, you're pretty good. I'd like to be maybe a future employee. We've had a couple of those circumstances where people really just really enjoyed working with the organization, or they set up a rapport because the team's been working there and doing good work and got a good reputation. And so anytime you use the organization's information, be sure to check back with the champion to see if it's okay. Even in your resumes, a lot of times students that go through this course will put all this project work on their resumes. These are promotion builders. These are job getters. We've had a lot of people put in there, hey, we worked on this project. Here's the return on investment. I worked in a team, got good results, and they indicated some of that stuff. It's just a good practice once you get started. You'll take a moment with the champ and say, hey, look, if we use it in this way, well, I'll ask you about it. It just adds a little extra professionalism to it. So that's a good way to correct data. Okay. If there is any issue, particularly he brings it up, and if there's anything like that, let us know. And how about your team here in regards to, were you able to meet, work out the logistics? How's things going for you four?
We're getting there.
Hey, let me ask you, is this information known by the team that you are going to be a go?
Yes, sir. I
Okay.
sent an email out to the team this morning.
Okay, that's excellent. That was all right. Any other comments from that team? Anything you'd like to share about your initial get-together, or what do you think about the project? Okay, I take silence means that things went well. Again, let me know. We're going to then ask the last team here. Edgar, you sent me a note. Could you kind of share with me what you just provided? Or share with your.
So recently, because our managers have been out of town on business trips and our supervisor has been tied up with a certain project that also involves the FAA at our facility, I wasn't able to get all the information as soon as I could. Unfortunately, because I just talked to my manager, he let me know that because we'd be handling our proprietary confidential information, he indicated that it'd be best if the team was just comprised of Cameron and I, who work at our place right now.
Okay. All right. Now he's a graduate, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I think both of them. I want to say my manager as well, but I know my supervisor is for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. I'm sorry, was that Cameron?
Yeah.
So your manager, the one who's had any ejection, is he an NGS grad?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, let me ask then, because we've had a lot of these courses go through, and we're going to, is there any, maybe we'll talk with this offline, but you'd like to be able to see if there's any possibility whether you would, if we can do anything to resolve his fears. Do you think there might be?
I'm not for certain. We'd have to talk to them again, and I'm not for certain that they'll be immediately available because, like I said, I know one of the managers is currently in business travel in India, and I think the other one just left either today or will be leaving tomorrow, and our direct supervisor, like I said, is tied up in a current project right now involving the FAA.
Okay. All right. Okay. And see, Judith, are you online?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Judith, are you working currently in a classified billet?
Yes, I'm in the skiff.
Okay, all right. Here's what we I like to do, because this is, we've got two four-person teams, and then this one, which is 3. And so it'd be, you know, the NGS rule is 4 on the team. Now here's what I would like to just present to the class. This is not an insurmountable situation. Is that let's see if there's possibility we can find some way. We've got Judith, works in a classified environment and probably in that. And if we can possibly look forward, if there's take care of the fears, I think would be my first course of action. And I'm going to rely on you guys and your opinions. I don't want to press anything. I don't want to jeopardize the project in any way, but I would like to make the attempt to ensure that they might consider having Judith, and I'll be glad to talk with your manager as well. If not, then what I would ask is that if there might be another nomination of a project, that if one of those and the other 2 teams, think of a project that you may entertain or would want to work on separately, and then Judith and yourself may be a team then for that. So that would be one of our other options. And so let's kind of see what works forward with this particular project. And for a minute, I thought earlier that we might have 2 teams one in turmoil. So in that regard, looks like we've got 2 pretty green lights and one that we need to resolve on. And so fear not, we will resolve this. The push to come to shove, we at one time had 5-person teams. That is a fallback, but it's not as good as the other one because you get a lot more traffic going, a lot of interactions and that type of thing. You don't get quite the same level of individual work and contribution that way. So 4's been the max, and I have to go to academic affairs to get an exemption on that. So there are, fear not, there's, Judith particularly, there are venues here to ensure that students will have ability to go forward. Okay. All right. Judith, you're okay?
Yes, I am, sir. I'm listening. I'm good to go.
All right.
We'll see what shakes up.
Yeah, and if you would, maybe Edgar or Cameron, we can, if we have a chance to talk about that, our specific concerns, and even if they would be open to having a 3rd member. And the reason I also recommend to champions and champion organizations is that having just somebody on the outside that doesn't think like they do is often the real enabler for a team to make innovative improvements. I have seen that time and time again, that people outside of the industry coming in, students and working on these teams, bring so much to that, and it's echoed by the students on the team themselves. The champions frequently really appreciate the outside looks, and so it also provides just a better set of recommendations, I found. So there's a lot of benefits to the organization as well if we can make that happen. Okay. Any comments from the rest of you concerning the team compositions or where you are or way ahead? If not, I'll jump forward. Let me, I have the slides, and on your side, do you see lesson 2, force field analysis and process flow?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's actually moving right now. Let me just, check it out. Okay. There we go. All right. Let me delve into the material that we have tonight and talk a little bit about where we visited from last week and revisit actually the DQs and talk a little bit about the problem statement. Because the problem statement, as I mentioned previously, is what you will begin your project on. It takes the place of a set of requirements that you would typically find if you're doing a contract type of work, like if you're doing a statement of work. They will normally outline, here's what we need the problem. If you're a contractor where you're doing this for hire and you're providing quality services, a lot of times they purchase you using a vehicle that if you're working for the government, for instance, there's a statement of work, there's an adjudication process, and then that becomes kind of like your problem statement, what you're going to be focused on where you're going to go through to improve. And so it's a tool that has many different applications. And that not only in the Lean Six Sigma field, in this particular methodology that we're using, is that frequently it's a very handy tool when people are just stuck, having them write out what they think they're working on, right? It's amazing, all that diversity of opinion. And then we'll talk about those challenges that you address, but it's not only foundational to your project at the very beginning, is that at the end, again, when you get back together about a year from now and you're doing your final briefs, what you should have is another slide with the problem statements embedded towards the end of your recommendations and around your results area. And you said, okay, this is what we started out as a team. This is what we improved. This is what the results we got. And you'll go back to those key metrics that you have in here and said, okay, it was operating at this level, at this cost, at this performance level. And through our recommendations, we've seen improvements by this much, or we predict performance will improve by this much. So you'll have typically both tangible results from your work that you'll be doing over this year that you may have already provided back to the organization, and then you will do a projection. But it's bookend. You come back in and say, okay, this is what we started on, and you come back in. And it's very important because it is extremely easy for teams, and particularly new teams that are working on improvement projects, to wander, to basically go off on tangents. And sometimes you're aided by the members of the organization or the champion that is now giving you, this is what we started to work on, and hey, you guys are doing really good. I'd like to work on this and work on that and this. So all of a sudden, instead of being focused at the center of the universe, you're now out on a tangent, another universe, working on something that you never thought you should be. And that is often very easy to fall into this trap. And so is that you'll keep coming back to this problem statement and relate the other tools and things that you have put into place and say, okay, as I told you in our problem statement, this is how this tool and this information, this data will help us better understand it, look at its root causes, and then you continue to integrate your story of your project back to the reason that you're doing it. And so it allows you to keep yourself focused and on target. And so that's one of the things, as I mentioned, that as we go through this and make changes to it, you'll, after the course you have with me, once you launch on to the other courses with other professors, sometimes after that conversation or something that you've gone through and maybe want to modify your problem statement, this is one of them I would ask for you to ensure that you let me know if there's going to be changes to your problem statement, and particularly significant ones throughout the course of this year. So if you have some courses, and I won't see you until later in the several months, if there are going to be changes in your problem statement, I ask that you let me know. Just send me a copy of it, because if you're moving in off what you or the charter had said, or what school agreed to, or what the academic requirements are, I just need to know. And usually it's just a notification. But if you're significantly growing in scope, or you're going into a different area where it's outside of your problem statement, just keep me advised, because that's one of my checks that I need to do throughout the year. So if that occurs, when I don't have a course, just send me an email or give me a call, and we'll move forward. So let's just pivot a little bit. In writing this problem statement and doing the assignment of looking at these other examples, every one of the problems that you looked at in the exercise that was from an NGS team at one time, and they looked at it and started scratching their head, and that's what they came up with. And you know, the more you look at these, the more experienced you become about what looks like a good one and how to avoid the traps. So let's just talk a little bit about what you think are some of the other chief challenges. I know you put it in your DQs, you had a chance to respond, but let's just kind of share these in this discussion right now. What you personally think, you know, as you've started the experience and what difficulties you may have had in writing one or ensuring a good one. So who would like to start? Just talk a little bit about what you think your chief challenges were, and also talk about what you thought about when you started looking at these other problem statements. What was any learnings that you had or new insights you may have received from that experience? Oh, that's great. Okay. Everybody's got their hand up at one time. I just don't know who to choose. Who would like to volunteer?
Hey, Professor, this is Ron. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Ron, please.
So one of the things I like to point out as a chief challenge is always people not knowing what the real problem is. So, you know, there's always a problem. I'm losing money every month, but I don't know why. So I think that's one of the basic first hurdles, is to kind of get down to really what your problem is. And, you know, just by saying, yeah, I'm losing $1,000 a month, that is a problem, but that's not really the focus to the problem. And if you have nowhere to start, you really can't go anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. And do you find in your travels and experiences that people fairly much agree about what the problem is, you know, at the beginning?
No. As a matter of fact, sometimes it turns into a project on its own where everybody doesn't know what the problem is, and they'll start pointing fingers at each other. No, it's not my department. It's yours. No, it's yours. And so, you know, we kind of have to go through that muck in order just to get down to the problem, and then start solving it.
Okay. Yeah. And well, you give up a great point, is that particularly, you know, ones that are cross-functional, right, that go across somebody's boundaries or touch, whose problem is it, right? That's in addition to what the problem is, you know, who owns it, right? Yeah. So what you said, I think is very good. One of the things that I might also recommend is that almost every team that we've had in NGS, there may be accountability issues, like who owns this problem, what the problem is. But if it goes and touches more than one organization and goes across organizational boundaries, which was, you know, I call it a boundary spanner, is that many times there is not responsibility pinned on somebody in the organization to go fix this or have to improve it. And one of the recommendations often that come from the teams, from the NGS teams, is that this is a cross-functional project, that we need to look at the membership, you know, like the St. Luke, maybe we need to look at having people that are representative of this project who've got a stake in it, and then ensure those people participate in the improvement opportunity. And sometimes it then drives your champion composition, because if it's cross-functional, then you want to have the ability to ensure that you're including the people that have a say in this and may have influence over your decisions. So those are really, you know, important points in writing the problem, and it allows you to kind of think about the bigger problem of how you manage all that. So, Ron, anything else you want to add?
No, just that was my, it's always been my first hurdle in my experience, and just thought I'd start out with that.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else want to kind of share their experience around the exercise you went through, or your discussion around problem statements?
Hey there, Professor. It's Jay.
Yeah, Jay.
So with our project, especially being in the military, they have that mindset of we've always done it this way. And with that being said, it'll be a lot of cross-functional issues, and that also filters over into the other function. They've always done it that way. And you talk about changing or improving a process, it brings a lot of people out of their comfort zone per se. They've always done it that way, and they don't really want to change it.
Yeah, and the other thing I found, having spent a life in boots, is that most of the leaders think that, well, I'm getting paid to solve problems. That's my job, right? Okay, I'm the problem solver. I need to take quick and decisive action. That's, I've been bred to do. And one of the things that just laying out a problem and documenting it, it takes it out of the sphere of a single individual. Yet often you will be able to take it out and say, okay, is this what we agree to, that you want us to work on, as opposed to a single individual trying to be the problem solver, that you have to engage others, and if you document it, you have to look at it in the same way. And that's one of the real important values of just not saying it, which is often was what, at least been my experience, hey, we need to work on this, and people, but they don't take the time to start thinking it through. And often when you put it on paper, right, it may look a little different what's been said. And often what problem as understood versus as it is stated is completely different, okay? Or everybody's got a different opinion about it. So you got the cultural biases that's going to go on in each one of your organizations, what their leadership style is, and how do they approach problem solving. And if you can standardize problem solving in an organization, in other words, you get people to kind of approach problems in a similar way, thinking the same way, using the same terminologies and tools, you are now really helping that organization to move down the road in alignment, because you're aligning not necessarily the ideas, but you are aligning the methodology, what tools they're using, just by saying, okay, we're going to write it down. This is how we're going to look at this. How we're going to think about the approaches and tools we're going to use. So one of the things that's very important for you as you're going through this is ensuring that, what the cultural bias is. And if you got some folks out there that, are very much in the decision-making mode, and you got people who are in conflict about this and they don't agree on the problem, then you're going to have to negotiate that up front to ensure that you're working on what both of them, or if they're key stakeholders, think it is. And so that's the other aspect. But I wish when I was in the military I had some of the problem-solving skills that the quality brings, quite frankly. You just become a better problem solver, a better decision maker, and a better leader. And that's one of the great benefits, I think, of using the quality tools. And sometimes it gets you away from the ready, fire, aim approach. So, all right. Hey, Jay, thanks. Anything else you want to add?
No, sir, that was about it. Okay,
yeah. And sometimes in the military, you're already at the very beginning at the saluting phase, right? Yes, sir. Yeah, we'll do that. No, ma'am. Yeah, we're going to do that too. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's see. Another comment, folks? Things that you may have learned from doing the problem statements?
This is Judith. So something I want to throw out there, is it possible that somebody can be too close, thus unable to really accept solutions or courses of action to resolve a problem?
Yeah, too close? Yeah. Well, let me ask, before I respond to that, what do others think in the cohort? Do you think, can you be too close to a problem? Do you think there's benefits or disadvantages to that?
Yes, after I said there are disadvantages if you're too close to the problem, or if you're too close to knowing what, I guess what I'm trying to say is, say you create something, and now you have a whole group of people looking at what you just created, and they're dissecting it piece by piece. So some people might take offense and say, well, no, I'm completely right. Why are you guys breaking up whatever I created?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, my point, because I think you might bring your own biases into it, and you're not being able to see other people's perspectives.
Yep. Yeah, and you got your own ownership into it. Sometimes, you know, you kind of hate to admit, maybe you contributed to it. So there was, I think I may have shared this, and I think it's kind of in line with what you have. Again, for those in the civilian world, I do revert back to a lot of my experiences because I found a lot of what I did in the Army or in the service has huge amount of application in the business world. In fact, they probably could use more of some of the leadership and capabilities you've seen. But there was a general that was 2-star at the time, and we were in a conference, and he was parading up and down. He was kind of a peacock, but probably one of the brightest guys I ever seen. He was a 2-star at the time, and then he became a 4-star, and it's you know, that's really very limiting in that. But one of the things he told us as he marched up and down the aisle, giving cohort, you know, telling us about what we're going to do, is that and motivating us to do that. He was saying that more American officers had been captured by the Germans in World War II by their own troops. And what he meant by that was that people, particularly like in the service, you usually come in, you know, you're there over a period, but what happens after a few months, you become a part of the unit. You become part of the culture. You come with Joel Barker called, who was a futurist, but he did a lot of work on this, called paradigms. In other words, the people in the organization see the thing the same way. They see it in a way that maybe they cannot detach themselves and see another perspective. And that kind of along the line what Judith was somewhat saying, and that is that once you become a part of the organization, is a lot of times you're not able to be objective about the thing itself. I had a discussion with this with a bunch of folks today in a meeting. They were saying this won't work where we have in our organization. It will not work where we do because we're unique. It's not different. We're different than anybody else. This won't work. And he was completely trapped by the paradigms. He'd never been out of the organization, you know, since he was young. He'd never seen anything differently and didn't realize that he had been captured by his own system and his own perspective particularly. And so that is why objectivity is absolutely important to each one of you. More difficult for those who are the sponsor of these MVPs because you live there. You've been in there. And that's where the great value of your classmates are. As I mentioned before, you often get a better set of recommendations from people who are outside of your industry. And it's been my case of my sampling. I don't have a statistical sampling, but I would probably say my gut feel is that teams that have that diversity that are not close to the project, not close to the problem, they often provide that so valuable insight. So you're right on, Judith. I think that's important. And I really caution each of you as you move through this, try to keep your objectivity. Because as you start to know the organization over the time and start to become familiar with who they are and what their beliefs are, is try to keep that objectivity in your own mind and approach. So, Judith, did you want to add anything else?
No, sir, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody else would like to add other comments about the trials and tribulations or insights from problem writing? Okay. Remember last week, I talked a little bit about a central metric. In other words, a key driver metric in a problem statement. Can somebody explain that? What might be a key metric? Either some of the examples we had in the exercise itself or one from your own experience. What's a key metric in the application of a problem statement? Hey, is that Megan? Are you chipping in now?
Yes, that was me. I'm sorry. My little one pressed the button to hang up the phone.
Oh, I thought you were making the comment. I'm sorry. Please.
No, that was just her. That was just her screaming because she's getting ready to go to bed.
Oh, okay. Well, see, the same experience I had today with the guys talking about the problems. We got a bunch of whiners. That's right on target. Megan, so what was your comment? Or did I just throw you completely off?
I didn't have a comment. I don't even know what I was going to say, honestly.
Okay. All right. Central metric is what we were talking about. You know, anybody say in their own words what a central metric or you know, a key measure in a problem statement?
Hey, sir, this is Sam.
Yes, Sam.
So I guess the key metric would be, just like you just said, one of the quantitative or something that's measurable in your problem statement, whether it's the time or the cost that you're looking to save or the price of the process overall.
Yeah. Hey, really well said. And I'm glad you introduced those three, right? Cost, quality, and time. Okay. And later when you have your project management course, that is the thing that all project managers typically balance: cost, quality, and time. You know how quickly we can do it, at what cost, at what scope, and so you typically problem statements are going to be one of those three categories. Okay. All right. Then what's the deal then about the three? Okay. What makes it? Which one? What is the definition of a central metric then again? Or which one? How do you define that then of the three? Which one is more important, right? And the question is not necessarily in your mind, but to your champion. Which one of these? And we start to say, you know, are we unconstrained? Can we do this? You know, we can get your defect level, your first time pass through, your costs down, whatever it might be, but it's going to take a lot of money to do that. Is that success? Well, no, you know, you have to have it at this level. Well, which one of these is going to be more important to you? You know, is there one more important than the other? And so you're asking really, what are the measurable things, right? You got to have that in your problem statement. You got to have a number in there. You got to have, you know, what percentage of meeting a goal or a standard or whatever the target is that we want to reduce it that's currently exceeding or not meeting. And so you got to have something that's numerical, because if you don't have that, there's no way to say you've done improvement. Like, it was bad and now it's better. Well, what does that mean? Well, you're going to have to put it into percentage and you have to quantify it. And I will, at the very beginning, when you do the problem statements, a lot of times you will put what we call placeholders in it. In other words, until you actually go out and get the actual cost or defect rate or the amount of time that it's taking, you may have ballparks in there. You may have estimates. Or you might write your problem statement with it's operating at XXX level, right? Okay, which is causing X amount of dollars being hemorrhaged, you know, being lost or costing us over time, whatever that might be. And then as you go through the next phase, which is really the measure phase, you may go out and start to quantify that, to take the initial large scale estimate and become more exacting. And that is frequently what happens, is that, well, yeah, it's causing a problem, but we really don't know to what degree. And so when you deal writing your problem statement, is that you may put a placeholder in there, or you have, give me a ballpark figure from the champion. You know, what level is this working on? Some of you, like, you know, what I've witnessed, like from Dave, you kind of quantified it already. You've done some analysis up front. And so you've got some things that are already basically would normally be done at the very beginning in the measure phase. Some of you already have that, which is provided an indicator of the problem. Be sure you validate those numbers, whatever it is, and ensure that, you know, whatever that key metric is that you're going to go try to fix, that you also understand the other metrics that may be involved, whether it may be, you know, hey, we're getting it at this cost, it's about right, just taking us a long time, and is that okay? You know, we provide a higher quality product, but slower, or at a higher cost. Is that okay? So remember, this is negotiations. Problem statements are negotiation tools. Okay, that's the other great advantage of them, is that you start to say, when we get to solutions, negotiating a proper solution, you want it tomorrow, it's going to cost you more. You want it at this level, Six Sigma, well, it's going to cost you additional resources to get to that level, or new technology that we don't have in investment. So these become negotiation items, and it starts at the very beginning in saying, what are the metrics? And so you start to negotiate these things in a way that makes great good sense and visible and numerical, and so you're more quantifiable, and then say, then that. Right. Hey, well, great. Great comments here. We're going to continue. You're going to massage these things. You're going to work with the problem statements. More to come. So great discussion on this. And you're going to be living some more of these challenges, I'm sure, in collecting the data. Many of you had some very good ideas about the problem with here. They're really a part of scope, and which is part of the project management phase. The initiating phase and defining scope is actually a project management phase, and the DMAIC model and the define problem statement is one of the first tools you use. So, okay. The second question I want to talk about real quick here is the champion's responsibilities. Kind of reworded a little bit, and as if you are talking to your champion and they say, well, what do you want me to do? Okay, what do you want me to do in this project? What will be my responsibilities? For somebody that hasn't participated yet, could you just kind of nominate, you know, what are some of the things you thought are the responsibilities? If champion said, oh, okay, I'm thinking about, yeah, we'll go ahead and sponsor this project, but what do I have to do? So how about offering to the cohort here verbally? I know you put them in the DQ, some of your ideas about what a champion's responsibilities are.
I think having the authority and the ability to remove roadblocks that might come across during their project.
Okay. Absolutely. Remove roadblocks. And in fact, that is the discriminator. If the champion does not have the authority to implement your recommendations, your project's a no-go, just flat out. And they've got to have that authority. Now, there may be, like we talked about before, is if it's a cross-functional project, there may be a governance board that you have to set up. And I've done this before in projects. In other words, if there's more than one leader involved, maybe managers, and there may be equals, but different departments, is that in order to get the project moved forward, instead of you guys negotiating between two different individuals, is that you just say, this is how decisions would be made. And sometimes in a project, we formalize that governance structure and say, okay, we'll have a board of 4 managers that will be co-chaired, and they become the governance, and they provide guidance to the teams. They provide all the things they need to do to be successful, but they share in the decision making, but they do it in one voice. In other words, that committee provides guidance to the team, where you don't get yourself caught into a situation where you got working for 2 different bosses. Oh, okay, they want us to work on this, and this one work on this. It's the same process, but it goes across. Yeah, you want to stay away from that. So just identifying that they have the authority. If they don't own it solely, you know, like the example we talk about, you know, if you have somebody owning enrollment in school, and there's a lot of different people out there, maybe out in units or something like that, that are not under control, then that's not a good project, because you have more than one boss, or you have people that you can't impact. So, okay. Great comment. Another one, what are some of the other responsibilities of a champion?
I'd say, is the champion able to dictate the amount of money that is going to go into the project or is going to be required for the project?
Yeah, Edgar, that's a very good one. One of the responsibilities that they have is to set your left and right limits. Another way to say what you did. And a lot of them are maybe financial. And one of the things, and we are really talking about scoping a project. You're trying to define what is your permissions that you have as a team, and to what, is it blue sky? You provide me whatever your recommendations are. Sometimes the champion says, hey, you need to keep this thing under 50,000 or 5,000, or we don't have any money that, for any other type of capital investments or improvement technology. And so you need to come up with a zero-sum game. Whatever you come up with has to be policy improvements, procedural improvements, nothing that's going to cost us any type of investments to improve this process. And so up front, you want to be sure that you understand that guidance from the champion and or the funding process. And so sometimes you'll say, okay, we can give you near term, but the longer term ones, which particularly may need capital improvement, the funding improvement, you may have to go say, okay, that'd be my longer term recommendations to you. And the champion says, well, something I can take to the bank right away, but I also want to let you provide me things that I need to go get additional funds for. I need you to give me that at this point. So the money aspect flows, is very impactful in a lot of different ways concerning this project. It's about their guidance. It's about getting it. It's getting that resources. So Edgar, that's a really good point. Okay. Any other comments that you have for responsibilities? Okay. We use the terminology. Yeah, I'm sorry. DeCarlo?
Yes, I thought to communicate openly about any changes that would have a direct impact on the outcome of the project.
Yeah. Oh, that is an excellent point. And not many of you, as I looked at your DQs, emphasize that point. And let me dwell on that a little bit. In any improvement project, the champion should be a focal point for communications. If you do project management, if you do it on any scale, typically you'll develop a communications plan. If it's a large one, and you'll develop here's the stakeholders that we need to communicate with. Here are the messages that we want to get out to the workforce who can be impacted by this project. And I've worked on fairly large-scale projects where we actually had a communications expert that would, develop blogs from the champion, provide updates on, activities. That's probably, won't be your typical experience, but using the champion as your communication. Anybody can think of ways to use your champion in this role as a communicator about the project. What type of things would you think your champion ought to be doing when it comes to communications?
Are you talking about leading the change or the implementation?
Could be. What you thinking about?
Well, I'm just thinking that they have the authority that once you finish your project or you come to the conclusion of your project and it comes time to implement the supposed solution, they would be the best to lead that change amongst the workplace. Yeah, exactly. It's a very good point. Change management, and I know, like Ron and a couple others have mentioned in your post, this is extremely important. If you're going through and you're going to make some changes that
may be fairly dramatic in its nature. In other words, it's a change in how a process is done. It may require people doing things that are outside their comfort zone because they're not doing very efficiently, or perhaps there's a new technology or requirement to change what they do and get out of the comfort zone. So these are things that which deal with the personal part of this and the communicating to the workforce the importance of this change and why they are doing it, and also expectations for them to implement it. And that is an aspect that you need to is part of. We're really kind of talking about in a larger senses. How do you manage the leadership of the organization? How would a black belt or a change agent provide recommendations about how to deal with change, the human element of this, about ensuring that people are aligned with it, support it, and that they are enthusiastic, is what some of you indicated as part of the role and responsibility of this, is that because if they are not enthused about your potential improvements, if they are not communicating the reason even that this problem needs to be solved, in other words, you get the problem statement, you work it out between your champion, yourself, and the faculty, and you don't communicate that reason we're doing this work back to the people in the organization, and then it comes to implementing those recommendations, about how far do you think that's going to go? It's going to be like a frog, right? You're going to get a set of recommendations, it's going to hop once, and it's going to land on what. And so you want to be sure that your recommendations are communicated. Why are we working on this? What's the story? And some other mechanisms just for you thinking about in the role of your champion, in addition to giving you resources and sponsoring you, is to also perhaps you may want to draft like an email out to for the champion to sign out to the workforce, or maybe insert something into the newsletter or make an announcement in staff call that you as a team of joint NGS students from across the country, a master's program, are going to be providing you free consulting, and please cooperate. I have high expectations, and this is what's going on. And so this is not like a secret, that it's between you and them, is that you want to ensure there's an announcement, typically back to the workforce about what you're doing and why they should cooperate. And sometimes you craft these things for them. In other words, you draft up an email, or you make an announcement that has something like, as you go through the project, you say, okay, hey, we've got some great gains, we've got some short-term gains. How about we tell the champion and get the champion to tell the folks, right? And that just gets goodwill for you, and that you're helping manage that change management aspect. So you'll talk more about this aspect, particularly in the project management course in managing this. But that's the other role, one of the important ones. So they need to be there. They need to provide you support. You certainly want to have their subject matter expertise. And generally, we will recommend that you have at least once a month an in-progress review with the champions, and that you have the opportunity to brief them about where you are with the projects, or about maybe after you complete each course, that you then have an opportunity to talk to the champions, give them a briefing, get guidance. Are you on track? Or there's other things that you're thinking about? What are the good things that you want the champion to promote back to the workforce about your team and your progress? And so there's that discussion. So part of the mission for free consulting is that they need to be able to spend periodic time with you. And a good technique, by the way, is once we get formed up in the teams, you get settled a bit, is do a conference call with your champion as a team to just introduce yourself. You can do a Skype, or you can do a video in, and that works. So they get to see you, and then you set up, okay, how about once every 6 weeks, or after every course, whatever works for their schedule, and give them a briefing. And we have 2 levels of champions, right? In NGS, we call them what? The senior champion, and what's the other one?
The day-to-day champion?
Yeah, the day-to-day. All right, and their function, typically it's more of a process level. They're the users, and often they do that. And we've had champions that are very high level that are at, senior vice president or admiral or general or fairly up the food chain, and a lot of times it's just hard to get to them because they're scheduled. In fact, you have to go warfare, hand-to-hand combat with the gatekeeper, which is usually admin assistant or secretary, whose job is to keep everybody else out and off his schedule, except for the highest priorities. And so sometimes you're fighting that, but then you're dealing with and talking with the day-to-day. And so a lot of times the champion will delegate, okay, I need a once a quarter brief. It'd be okay. I can get on my calendar. I'm really busy. I'm going to be traveling, that type of thing. But the day-to-day will be taking this. I've got great confidence in that individual, and he'll have to keep me informed. So whatever that relationship is in between you and the team, and that will be as unique as there are teams. So, but we'll be talking about that in the future about that. So just think about amongst the team about how you can coordinate maybe a lunchtime briefing or a phone call if possible. And if your schedules are just out of whack because where you are geographically, you can even just send a photo or something like that, or send an email introducing yourself as that, and it just makes the fact that the champion would appreciate you got an entire set of teams, just not one face or two faces right in front of them. Good point. Anybody else? Any other things on champions? Okay. If you got questions again from any of your champions about clarity, about their responsibilities, or about the role or expectations, that's fine. Well, one time we actually had an NGS when we had classroom locations as opposed to this online. The champions and the charter signing would be face-to-face. I would go visit with the team and the champion at the champion location. The students were generally in the geographical location. We signed the charters. Sometimes I would chat with the champions or whatever questions they may have had about the project from the school's perspective. And then at the very end is that we get feedback. At a minimum from your champions, by the way, is that they will need to sign off on your project. And what do you mean by that? Well, that means that there's a letter or form letter that you provide to the champion at the end of the project and say that they agreed to basically your recommendations or agreed to the conduct of your project, and would be looking for their acceptance of your recommendations. And a lot of times they'll say, okay, we accepted these recommendations from the team. I'm going to think about recommendation 4 and 5, and 6 we're not going to do because it just isn't feasible for our company at this time. So there is then a written document actually for the champion to provide back at the end of your projects. There will be briefed in your last presentation that says, okay, here's the feedback we got from our champion about this. And a lot of times the team is blown away, quite frankly. The champion often will provide them very glowing recommendations, comments that the team really just didn't realize that how pleased they may have been. So hopefully that would be your experience as well. But that's the other part of the recommendation of their responsibility is to sign off on the project, in addition to the academic faculty ensuring that you have demonstrated competencies in the quality management bodies of knowledge and skills that we expect of all the students, is that we also look for the champion feedback on your project. So any questions around that, guys and gals? Okay. So let's transition a little bit over to this one, which is we're going to talk a little bit about okay. Just a second, folks. Let me check clear my chat real quick. Hold on for a minute. You can. Okay, thanks. Force field analysis. First of all, this is not Star Wars, okay? Force fields, or anything like that. And it's really a quality tool. I like to think of it as a very weak risk analysis approach. In project management, again, we will build on this concept and take your force field analysis, which is one quality tool, and expand it in a little different direction. But I think the concept about risk assessment, and that is that you're looking at the everything that may negatively impact your project. All right, what may be something that causes you as a team to not to be successful? What are the things that may be obstacles or that would need to be addressed at the very beginning or perhaps throughout the course of the project that you want to know about? It may be things that may be done based on triggers. In other words, if we don't get the budget that we were anticipating, our $50,000 limit on our project, it will go down to zero. So that's where you as a team would be an example of a risk that is based on what we just talked about. Other risks and things that we will talk about in the force field analysis is, okay, what are the things that are going well, okay, in support of your project? Basically is that there's two things. You look for forces of change. In other words, what's enhancing those things that will support your project, reasons why people would really like to have this success that they want to have out of this project. We call it forces for change. It could be the terminology of enhancing things to your project. And then the opposite side of that, where are the forces against the change? Where are the risk or the challenges, the obstacles, maybe other type of terms that you may use on this. And basically, a force field analysis is that we're looking for the good stuff, the enhancing things, and we're looking for the other stuff. And then what we want you to do is then use a tool, right, to graphically display this. And we're going to be, this is one of your projects upcoming. It's based on what your projects are. What are the force field analysis? What are the things that will be supporting your project, and then doing the other. And one of the important aspects about the risk force field analysis is that you want to stay focused primarily on those things that will be successful or challenges to the project. A couple of things that you do not want to do in force field analysis, up there where it says, forces against change or detracting forces or, challenges, you put the, you put the manager that everybody hates up there, right? You got the naysayer that, will say this project will never work. Never put a person up on this, okay? Or a position. I have seen actually in the potential for that is to tube your project at the very beginning. When we talked about concepts and quality, talked about Deming, is not blaming people, but fixing systems. And sometimes teams will put this thing up there and they will say, okay, here's a problem. We've got this guy or this gal, that really is going to be against us, okay? And then you put that up on this force field, and then somebody looks at it, and then all of a sudden the champion or the boss calls that person in and says, hey, how come you're not a team player? And all of a sudden, there's bad will at the onset of your project. So that don't ever focus on any of your comments which are personal in nature in this. Now, do you talk about that amongst the team, that you're going to have people that are going to be out there? Absolutely. Right? Because the other purpose that you want to do at this phase and these force field analysis generation is to think about who are going to be out there, who are the snipers. And what do we mean? Here's another military analogy. What does a sniper do? Now, anybody know? Just describe. What does a sniper do? What's their job, and how do they act?
Recon.
Yeah. And then what?
Put still on target.
Yeah, that's right. So there's stealthy and well camouflaged, and they're have the ability to take out their target at the most vulnerable time, and where they can't do anything, that they're basically have really taken their shot. And the analogy of that is that often in improvement project, there will be these snipers, right? There will be folks out there that will say, I'm not in support of this project. I don't want to see it succeed. I think they're going in a different direction than I think is important. This may have my personal impacts, okay? And the problem with that then is that they will wait often until you're at the most vulnerable and where you can't do anything about it. Here's an example. We had an NGS team was working on improving a suspense system. A suspense system is really how workflow is assigned in the Pentagon. This was a military team. They were over here in the Washington, D.C. area. There was a team of four, I think it was, on that team. And they were working in the one of the high-level offices up here is Vice Chief of Staff, and they do direction of paper, and they make assignments of what work gets done by these staff officers, and various tedious and very time-consuming, just the administration tracking of these various actions that these action officers have to work, where they are in the system, and et cetera, et cetera. But it really depends on the flow of work within the Pentagon if this system is not elegant and swift and quick. And so this NGS team really came up with a very elegant set of solutions of how to improve movement of suspenses, tracking them, and doing it actually just using Microsoft and basically the technology that already existed. And it actually got all the way up. They started with an 06 level, which was a colonel who was their senior champion who just loved this recommendations. And they ended up actually briefing a 4-star. And most of these folks that were in this team, I think the most senior person was a major. All the rest of them were, captains and civilians. I think we had one E7 in there as well, a sergeant first class. And and for most part, anybody who's been in the military, it's like briefing God, or divinity, because that's you don't see them very often. These very high people, and this team, because of their results and their soundness of the recommendations and the impact that it had on how work got done in Department of the Army, in the Pentagon, that's who their final brief was to. Now back to the sniper story. There was a CIO, the Chief Information Officer, came in at that final brief to the very senior leadership when the team was briefing on this, and said, "Oh, by the way, I've been working on a software buy that we've already piloted. We've got money invested into it that would do the same thing we do here." So stunned silence by the team. And then the general says, "Well, how much have you invested into it?" And he's talking like the pilot was like $300,000. So the general's thinking, well, I can't back off something we already put $300,000 on, even though this is a no cost, much more elegant, and nobody else in that room knew about that until that last briefing, and that's when that came up. And so the recommendation is, well, we have to do a comparison about the NGS team's recommendations versus what the CIO come up with, and of course that added more dimension and such. The moral of the story is I want you to think about who could be for you and against you, okay? To think about who might be out there that you need to include in your upfront process. Sometimes you will include them in those that may be against you, you include them in your assessment to get their opinions, to include them and flush them out. Because if you can flush a sniper out of their hiding place and get their agenda out in the open, then you can deal with it. And that's how you deal with that. And so one of the things I want you to think about in force field analysis, who may be in those roles and understand that. So the other aspect about this, and we'll cover this again more, and we will build in your project management, is that you understand what are the challenges, and then what you also need to do then after you develop the challenges, particularly you develop what we call countermeasures or mitigation plans. In other words, if this is going to happen, how might we mitigate that? And for instance, if we may not have money, there may be a cut because sales are down or because other priorities. You stay close to the budget officer and say, hey, first time you get an inkling of that, let us know because that will impact our project. So you develop a mitigation plan. In other words, how can we address the challenge or the risk that we have? And so it may not be as impactful or remove it altogether. And so if you have somebody that perhaps may not be for your project, maybe include them in your data assessment. That's another example then of a mitigation plan. There are other risks in addition just to what's going on inside your champion's organization. Other risks to your project are ones from yourself. For instance, if you may be having a job change, if any of you who are sponsoring organizations, perhaps if there's a deployment, if the balloon goes up, we go to the war, well, we're going to have to probably find a different project, I suspect, for you guys, working on the Air Force. There may be, any of you may be thinking about, an opportunity. We've had students come up with a job offer. So that is not only true of the sponsoring student, but each one of you. So anything that may impact at any degree your success or continuing participation, you may want to include that too in here. So that your team is aware of what may be something that may impact your project, and so you know how to deal with it. Risk assessments and force field analysis are not meant to be a one-time thing. We did it at the very beginning, and then we left and drove away. You want to be able to revisit this throughout the course of your project because things will change. Other risks may be popping up. Other challenges may be popping up. And so you just want to be able to sit down and talk about them as a team. But also when you have the IPRs, the in-progress reviews, you may want to bring them up to your champions. Say, hey, we're not getting our information. One of the risks we found, and you've already addressed it like Dave did, is that, oh, we need to have non-disclosures, okay? We need to sign those. That's, a potential risk that we have to deal with, and so whatever it might be, you want to be able to capture it and then say, what is our approach to deal with it? And so I'll ask for you to kind of do a kind of low-level one with this. So we'll talk about this in project management again, because this gets very robust if you're doing a very important project where there's a lot of money involved with it, where there is risk, financial risk, or there's political risk. If it's, if it fails, it may not be costing a lot of money, but people lose face, which may be even worse sometimes than the fact is that they had a financial loss, that the project didn't achieve the results that it wanted to, and people will find that. So whatever those things are, it'll be unique to each one of your teams. I want to talk to you individually about these particular risks and how your team approach may be to mitigate these things. That is to see what you can do as a team to reduce the negative impacts. And the other aspect about this, you also want to be the cheerleader for the things that are strengths for your team. Like, hey, we got a lot of great results already. We already figured out a way to reduce overtime, or we got people who have more time to do more value added, and we got that information out and we've maximized it. So it's using both sides in the project management and managing that. Okay. Any comments or questions around? We've got a few examples and kind of walk through that. You don't have to get cute on term, graphology here, but the idea again, one team here, when they went through, not only identified what the particular enhancing and resisting forces are, they put a weight factor to them. See the numbers there? Which ones they had on this. Now, I would never ever, as I said, put a name on this and provide it to the champion or any member of the organization. This is like a no-go. Now, did the team talk about these each individuals who they may want to talk about and do it offline? Yeah. Okay. But never ever show a chart that you got like this. You're just with the names on the side of it that says, here's the resisting forces. It's just a great way to get deep in trouble. And so this one was working on a fighter jet F-16 that is an install engine and testing process. And so these are the type of things, this is what their team came up with, and assigned some weight to it. So you can see the, they thought actually that actually the favoring forces were tipped in their favor, that there were a lot more things that were advantaging. So they had a little scale there tipped to the left. And that kind of is a visual that quickly will say, okay, we think we have favorable wind behind our back. We got a lot of good things going for this. And then they also kind of talked about, here's the coalition member or the champion member that we think may be responsible for dealing with some of the issues that we may be having that are coming out of the workforce. That's the other thing. Okay. Here's another one that kind of did the same thing. They put a weight score on that, a little bit more balanced. And they put their problem statement in the middle. So that's one way to take a look at that. And they listed the various areas about what may be coming up or challenges in here. And then, like non-committal employees or resistance to available funding or change by builders. Okay, another example. Okay. They put the goal of the purpose of the project. Really, you don't have to write a goal statement in our context. Your problem statement will be this whole sufficient to talk about what we need to do here. And so you can take a look at that, what's in the charts. Any questions around force field analysis or its use? And what I'm going to ask is that in addition to these charts in here that when we do our briefing, because we'll talk about this in our team mentoring sessions, is what do you think are your mitigation actions? In other words, what are the things you said for the things on the right-hand side of these scales of this force field analysis? What are the things you think you can do to reduce the negative impact of that against change or opposite? So be sure to prepare yourself to brief on that, and then actually think about your actions you will do. Okay. Some of you probably flowchart the way to the grocery store. Some of you use flowcharts and are Visio gurus that you're capable of doing all these type of things. But let me talk a little bit about flowcharts in the context of where we are at the very beginning. I'm going to emphasize a few things that are not in the slides, but I think are going to be very important to developing scope and using flowcharts. A lot of different flavors of these flowcharts. Visit the take book if you haven't done a lot of flowcharting. Using the appropriate symbologies and graphs important. And there's a lot of different flowcharts for different occasions. So we'll briefly touch on some of those. But you're going to have to do basically two types, or three, potentially in this at a minimum. One is going to be a macro flowchart, and that's what I want you to work on at the very beginning as a part of the define phase. And it is describing actually the scope of your project. It's another way to think about this. The macro flowchart, which usually is only like 4 or 5 steps that you lay out. What it does, it is a visual in the define phase at the very beginning here at the project. Its purpose is not really to show flow steps so much. It is more about scope. In other words, you look at this flow chart, macro flow chart, and you may on your macro flow chart say, I'm working on engine repair, or we're looking at Dave's group and what you're doing, and we're looking at the project out at UTC. Is what's included and what's excluded. That's part of scope. Is defining that. Where is this in the project? Remember, your problem statement should talk about where is this located, and by listing and say, okay, this is this project or this process that we're looking at, okay, is in this department, okay, and widgets that come out of this go into this department. Well, we're not working on that department. They come to us from this department, and you show that kind of the visual. In other words, here's the steps. All right, this is where this the scope, the beginning and end points of our project are, and that's what you can show in a macro flow chart. And so a lot of times when they develop a macro flow chart, they'll have here's the major steps, the major high level steps of our project, and then you show what's surrounding that, where what was before it, what was after, and what you're doing then is starting to make it very clear about what the scope of your project is. We're not looking at this department. We're not looking at this aspect of this project. We are only looking at what you see. So a lot of times when they develop the flow chart, you have maybe one color for the macro flow chart that has the focus of your project, and sometimes you have the other steps then kind of grayed out, or maybe some other type of distinguishing method to highlight what you're working on versus that. So it is a visual. It is a defined phase, which is where we are now, is what I really want you to focus on and develop. Later on, when we do the measure phase, and you may have maybe if you already have a flow chart developed, that's fine. Typically, the more detailed flow chart, which actually shows the steps of your process and the decision points and all the things that get into a lot more detail, you use that in your measure phase of the DMAIC model, and that is because it's starting to show, okay, on this flow chart, it has X amount of steps, and then you start to quantify those steps. It takes up this amount of time, or this is where the defects occur in the process, and you can really start to show the data that you're collecting in conjunction with that. And the functional flow chart provides a great graphic for you to figure out what do you need to look at. So it's again a visual. It's kind of like a battle map. You can start to look at the flow chart and say where we think are the problems, where maybe we're looking at in here, or the bottlenecks in this process. And it has utility to then help you figure out where to collect data. And usually the macro or the functional flow chart, which is a much more detailed, view of your project. We'll give you some examples of these both, are in your measure phase. And if you already have some of that and you want to bring it into the discussion at this point, that'll be fine. But I want to be able for you to brief the scope aspect of your project, and we'll talk about that in our mentoring session. As I mentioned, there's macro flow charts, there are swim lanes, or sometimes call them what they call the basic or functional flow chart, and then there's all variations of that. There's another one we will use called a value stream map, which is another variation that really isn't a flow chart, and from the standpoint of what we're talking about here, and if any of you, get the lean and use that tool, you'll have that and be required to develop one of those in our business analysis course. But right now, we're going to be looking at things which are kind of right out of the definitions here. They're also in the tag, and be using these symbologies, these symbols, for these particular flow charts for the functional ones, for the basic flow charts. The value stream map will use a different set of graphics. Its purpose is different than what we got here, and so these are some of the ones. Okay, just basic 101. Let me just review processes, right? If you can't make a process flowchart of your project, then it's probably not a process-based project. And so this is kind of one of the litmus tests in developing a macro flowchart. If you're able to describe it as a process and you be able to flowchart it out, then you're probably working on a process-based opportunity, improvement opportunity. If you can't, then you probably are problem-solving something, right? So this is one of the litmus tests, and it's really helpful us in our purposes in NGS to figure out whether you're working on a project, or if you can't flowchart it, then it's probably just a problem, and that's a good technique to do this. But if you can't think it through about what the steps are, it's kind of like doing the pizza thing. If you were able to visualize and say, okay, you can visualize and just think about pizza, right? You can right now, hopefully you had supper, but if you think about pizza and, and is it timely or not, and you're not able to visualize a process for its delivery, you're going to be stuck. And okay, and instead of just focusing on the pizza and its earliness or lateness, you've got to think of process. How did they get there? And basically, one of the things when you do your scope briefing, when you do your macro flow chart, here's the start point of our project. This is where it begins, what our team's going to be looking at, and here's the end point of our project. Okay, so what you're now doing is not only showing it graphically, but you're describing it in meaningful terms of start point, end points. Here's the start point of our process. Here's the end point of the process. once you have this, you can do a lot of stuff with that. You can start to calculate cycle time in between those 2 points. You can start to look at the steps in between the front and the end of that. And what it does, it says, okay, this is where the scope of our project is. When you brief your champions, they can look at it visually and say, oh, wow, we are between start point and end point. We're not looking at where this part is loaded out of the area. We're not going to be looking at it after it has the inspection that's done after this particular area. We're not going to be looking at any supplier processes upstream. We're not going to be looking at any contractor processes in support of this. And what you're now describing then, what's included, what's excluded, and you have a visual. So process of interrelated steps, you can probably typically say, here's the start point. Here's when stuff comes in, input. They do something to it to make it better, make it apply it to aircraft or whatever you do to manufacture something to improve whatever quality check process. That's the actual value-added work is in between. And typically you have these decision points about something. And does it go back into the system or does it only go in one direction? So this is basically a basic process map. And a macro flow chart a lot of times may not show the decision points in there. In other words, this shows overall, we do this at the very beginning, the second part of that, and then we do that. So not always are decision points in macro flow charts. You may have them in there. You're going to need to use some judgment. There is no hard set rule. I'm just describing the outcome to you. You've got to figure out as a team what best way to how do you construct a flow chart. But typically, these are the things we want you to discuss. And here is then a more detailed one, okay? And this is an example of, how someone laid out and say, okay, here's the scope of our project, here's what we're doing, here's what's included, and then here's a more detailed view of that. And a lot of times, this is the first gift you give back to the organization if they don't have this laid out. Is many times NGS teams, it's like the neighborhood pizza, is that it hasn't been documented. We have a process that we follow. You just watch the people do it. The orders come in and the pizzas go out. But it may not be on paper, which means you can't improve it. And so you need to have then documentation about what process is. And a lot of times, as we talked about in the neighborhood pizza, different techniques to develop this flow chart. And that is, a lot of times, if the organization already has one and it's in a manual or a book, you start to use that maybe, but it's been my experience, and particularly if something is governed by higher headquarters guidance or, principles maybe that goes across the entire organization, is they're not following it. Or they hybrided that process for their needs at the local level. And so one of the things that you want to discover when you start to do the flow charting later on is that, are they actually following it? Is it different by shifts, for instance? Is this been modified over time? And how do you know? And so sometimes you will develop the flow chart, kind of like what Ron talked about last time, doing with stickies, up on the wall, and you develop from scratch, or you may do it through observation, or you may have subject matter experts, that may have worked on this before, and but you want to validate that this is the current process, and then you show this, and this is going to be very important for you, and then deciding where to do your data collection, and sometimes this is part of your data collection. You sit down and say, okay, what do you do in this step? And about how long does it take for you to do that step? And then, how many of those widgets do you do in a day or an hour? Okay, so you're asking quantitative questions while you're building the flow chart, but that's, again, technique. This is just an example of the type. A lot of different names. So this is a different visual for flow charts. As you can see, it's got two things. It's got functional areas across the top. Here's the project manager, and here's the operations. They got the different divisions that are on the top. And then they have basically various life cycle projects on the left-hand side. How does this go? It starts here with the project manager, and then they give it to the OEM decision-making guy, and then they send it over to the QE. Okay, and so you can see the flow chart how it goes through the organization and who touches it. It may be different functions that are involved with that, but basically you're outlining what's called a swim lane. Column is a chart, what they call it here, but it has a lot of value by showing how not only what are the steps, but who's involved, perhaps. And that's a great value. You can start to see, well, how many times it goes up between one department going back, and you can look at that. And so it's a different look, and it has different value. These are perfectly acceptable as well when you're looking at flowcharts. So selecting the right tool, looking at the tag book, using consulting what's the best approach flowchart. You have to have one in your project. Generally, they're functionals, and generally they have the macro. But whether you have a swim lane, the type of column chart, or whether you have a functional like we showed you on the other page, it's kind of up to you. Okay, and at the very beginning, we are going to be looking solely at in the beginning of this. In the define phase, we're scoping things out. In the measure phase, we're developing a flow chart that says this is the as-is state. This is what we think how it is currently operating. Later on, after you collect data and then you go through the analysis phase, you will develop a 2B, a future state, an improved state, a flow chart that may reduce steps and decrease complexity and enhance the efficiency and the cost of that. So at the beginning, just document how it currently is. Later on, in the analysis phase and coming up with recommendations, that's where you're going to have your 2B. And a lot of times you're shown side by side. Okay, here's what it used to be. This is what it's going to look like. And then here's the benefits of our new and improved process. Okay, and you show that side by side. We'll talk more about that later on. But we'll start with the as is. And again, some examples of that. And you can eyeball that for all you want as you go forward. The mapping tools, there's a lot of Gemba Academy, and they've got really some techniques in there that are focused in on the process mapping, different resources. The tag book that you have is very important to use. So you got a lot of different looks in there, but for you who are visual and like to sit down, and many of you give me very positive feedback about the Gemba, what you've been getting out of that. There are some resources here for you to take a look at. Proficiency with this tool is a good thing to have. If you haven't done flowcharting, Visio, which is actually a Microsoft suite, has a lot of capability. There are iGraphics. There's tools out there that allow you to do what they call modeling. In other words, you're able to not only show the chart, but you can start to maybe put data into it that you capture. And so you can start to say, okay, at the decision point, this is how many decisions were made and how many were rejected at this point. Or you can start to look at how long did things take, and you start capturing cycle time. And then a lot of the capabilities and more mature use of these tools are some of the things that you can use with some of the software. Where really it makes it a lot easier. Sometimes you can just hand crank it, and that is, you make your own flow chart and then you put the data beside. But if you use some of these more sophisticated software suites, you can do a lot more with it than just graphically display the steps in sequence. So, you're not required to have any of that. You can do PowerPoint. Also has the capability to make flow charts and develop graphics that are fairly easy to put together. You can get through NGS by that capability, but you're not required to have separate software. Does anybody have any other software, packs that you use to do flow charting, or some of the things that we talked about in regards to graphical representation of steps?
I know that ASQ has a whole bunch of Excel worksheets, and one of their Excel worksheets is just a flowchart to it. It's an Excel sheet, but it actually has the Visual Basic enabled. And the other one that I used to use also is it's a free one called Click Charts, one word, and you can download that, and it's a free software.
Oh, okay. Hey, thanks, Ron. Hey, listen, you never fail to come up with great resources and tips, and let's continue to do that throughout your entire degree program. And if I parked, I think in this previous course, list of software that you have that you can buy or you can purchase, and a lot of it's just free and download. So what I'll do is then we can add, because I don't think I have quick charts in there, but and ASQ, by the way, if you haven't had a membership, and if you're going to be involved in quality, it's it's just part of professional development, and plus you get a student discount if you got an NGS.edu email. You can get membership discounts, and that's how I got involved eons ago. And so take all advantage of all the software you can, including I see some of you still using like Microsoft. I'm not sure if it's 1997, okay, but you can get free Microsoft Office because you got a student EDU for free. You can go on to Microsoft site and download it, and you can be, out there with the best, basically. So if you haven't looked at that file, there's got a lot of great tips in it. So hey, thanks, Ron, appreciate that. And I might circle back, be sure I've captured what you have, and we'll add it back into that. Anybody else have any software around like graphics that you want to share? All right. If you do, continue to share. Okay. Let me talk a little bit about the way ahead. We're going to work in teams. You got an assignment to draft an MVP problem statement. And at this point, for UTC, Judith would, and I don't think there would be a problem, but continue to hang with the two guys here, and for the initial assignment, and then we'll try to get this resolved here over the next couple of days, if possible. Let me talk to Cameron and Edgar shortly, if you could hold on for a few minutes after I finish. Just want to kind of talk to you about maybe an approach here. But the next assignment is to start working on, and for those other teams that are solid, is to, well, let's look at for your MVP, to do a draft. And when you do this, I want you to be able to learn from each other, and ask, and as you develop the problem statement, you're not just developing the problem statement, you're developing an understanding of the organization and starting to share that with your fellow students. And so go back to the 5 lots, what are we working on? How long has been the problem? What's the degree? Do we have any data? There may be things you need to develop as a team, questions that you may want to go back to the champion with and say, okay, what does success look like for you? What's the primary emphasis here? Is it to improve readiness rate? Is it to decrease costs with tool loss? Whatever that is, be sure you get that input. And so there's kind of maybe, here's what amongst you guys within the team, and there may be questions that you want to, as a team, to go back to the champion. And let me reemphasize that you as a team want to go back to the champion. And and once you kind of get yourself established, you may want to look at just even introducing yourself to the champion as soon as you can, revisit your your name that you have, and be sure all of those type of things that everybody's comfortable with that. Is that this is part of your understanding the nature of the organization, and so developing the problem statement is one of those good things to do, to develop that understanding. Develop a force field analysis in which you start to understand from the what may be the environment there around, what may be enhancing, what's the reason to work on this project, what might be things you start to consider. And I want you as a team also to consider, remember, the things that have been identified, how important maybe are they? You may want to look at them, what would you do to improve your situation with these things, maybe risk. And then the other one would be start to take a look at developing a macro, okay, not one of the detailed ones at this point. And if you have a detailed already that you've gotten developed, I want you to go back to the macro where it's only about 4 or 5 steps, okay? And I want you to be able to brief this in terms of scope. In other words, this is what we're working on. This is not what we're working on. Here's the start point. Here's the end point. That's how it needs to be kind of presented in brief. Okay. Instead of the 48 hours prior to lesson 3, if you get them in, again, as soon as you can, because, you know, like you, I usually build at home, and then I try to incorporate into our class, you know, your work, and I try to give you as much bandwidth to work on things before we start. But if it's not there by 6, it's really challenging to get it, you know, download it and present it and then back up and be sure I'm on before and the technology. So as soon as you can get the things in, but usually I want to try to incorporate that. So next week we'll have some discussion. We'll talk a little bit about tools of SIPOC, which is a kind of a high-level view of the organization, and we'll look at customer requirements matrix, which is looking at customers of this project. And then what we're going to do is that these products that you are developing, your problem statement, force field analysis, the macro flow chart, SIPOC, and CRM, the customer requirements matrix, will be then the subject of our team briefings, okay? So next week we have a large seminar, again, kind of light lifting, not a lot of content, but develop those 2 additional artifacts, those 2 things, the CRM and this list here. And then what we're going to do, we're going to have a discussion, and also you need to list your guiding coalition. And so what we're going to do then after that, we won't have a large seminar after next week, is that we're going to go through and then I'll meet with you as a team. It may be during the same time if that is convenient. If there's a time that is more convenient to the team, right now I can't do anything during the day much just because of my situation, but we can schedule up on a Tuesday or a Monday or certainly Wednesday night I have availability, or we may even be able to go Thursday after that. But we'll have some team sessions. And what I want to be able to do is be, after we go through this, is that talk to you about the team and where you are with these things and see if there's any issues and address that in a more tailored fashion. And that's where this class is going to be pretty much ending up, is ensuring that you got a good baseline on this and that you've got a good start on your problem statement. There may be iterations of this as we go forward. So that's all I have, all the ammo I've shot for tonight. So what questions did you have, either what we covered tonight or assignments way ahead? All right. Here's an important question. Did you guys learn anything tonight? Okay. A little feedback would be helpful. Okay, all those who didn't learn anything tonight, you got a D. What do you think? All right. I would like for, and by the way, I do appreciate feedback. Anything I have in regards to pace or presentation, feedback champions. Anybody want to share that? You'd be glad to hang on. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, and let's hope the Wizards and the Capitals and the Nats all reign into championships this year. So, thank you very much. We'll see you in a week.
Night.
Bye. Hey, Dave, are you still on? All right. Maybe not. Okay. Hey, listen, guys. Let me ask again. I know you just Edgar and Cameron, you're still there, right? And Judith, I think you're still on.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, I'm still here.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that I don't want to, I said, I don't want to put anything in jeopardy or anything in the bind, but you mentioned that is your manager, is it going to be gone for a while or?
Mark Posada, he's our supervisor. When I talked to him, from what Guillermo had told me is that Mark would be in business travel, but I don't recall if he's already taken off or if he's leaving soon. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be at work until Tuesday, but I can try to communicate and see if I can get you Mark's phone number or his contact information. I can get you his email at best right now to see if we can set up a time to talk about this.
Yeah, I tell you what, you can send me the email, but I would like for you, because I don't want to, call and sound like I'm, a salesman. But we've done a lot of projects out of UTC. We've done, like I said, we had a whole cohort, I think, from UTC, and we've had, even we used to do them over in Connecticut at the headquarters. So if we can, hopefully, if we could resolve this, I would like to see if that's possible. But I would like to, Judith, to continue as a part of your team, but I don't want to put you guys in any type of jeopardy. In other words, if you're working or sharing something that may be sensitive or important.
Sir, do they have any confidentiality statement that they want me to sign or something? I mean,
I wasn't able to gather that. Unfortunately, like I said, I just briefly talked to our manager, and that was just his response right off the bat. He just said, well, I'd rather only be Cameron and you because you guys are going to deal with confidential stuff. But we can ask and see if there is anything else. I did try to reach out to our HR department, but I never got an answer back. And we're also looking to our what we call ITC. It's pretty much a department that handles anything with any inbound or outbound information. And so I haven't been able to contact them directly because we were so busy this week.
Yeah.
But we will certainly do what we can to ask if there are any things that we can do so we can keep Judith on our team. Like I said, the only thing is that my supervisor or the manager had answered that right off the bat as soon as I said that we do have a tentative team member who is not affiliated with the company, and that's the immediate answer I got at that time.
Okay. Yeah, and I think, and I don't know if there's any restrictions. I'll check on the other projects we have. I know the lead faculty, Jack Kowalczyk, who, if I'm not mistaken, was the lead for one of our UTCs. But if there was any other type of similar circumstance, on how we dealt with it, might be helpful to that. Okay. So, yeah, as you know, my preference was, it's just better for you guys. And you know what the nature of the sensitivity is? It's one that has to do with competition sensitive area, or maybe there's issues there about performance levels or anything. You got any feel? Please don't share anything about it. You may feel would be appropriate to share, but just kind of get an idea of what might his objections be.
I'm not exactly certain as to specific things that are, because I mean, we deal with a lot of like testing data.
Yeah.
And so there even when it comes to, we have engineering drawings and some of the processes that require specific things or programs to work with.
Yeah.
So like I said, I don't know exactly what our manager would think would be like high risk. And that's where we have to check with him to see, and with the ITC department to see if what exactly is extremely sensitive and cannot be shared at all. Like some of the stuff for the assignments that that you assigned, we should be able to work just fine with it. Because it's just general stuff. But later, as we go into a project, like I said, I'm not really certain, and that's where we would have to talk with the manager and the other departments involved.
Well, my thinking also is that in developing this problem statement, this really will help them saying, what are we looking at in scope? Because in my experience, if you're working on a process, you're working on a process. We've had students in like healthcare, where there's restrictions for sharing healthcare information, and or looking at HIPAA requirements. People have to be trained, have to be part of the organization. And what we ended up looking at was just at the process. How long did it take to get this record moved from here to there? How many times did that occur? And it had no names, nothing that was proprietary. It was just not getting into the data itself, rather that. And so there'll be other things that that we have that we may even be like hypothetical use, or maybe not use actual data, but use approximate data. That so there's a lot, like I said, other techniques, and I'd like to give a shot at it, up on it. And so and let me know. You guys, Cameron, Edgar, you're on the site, you're on the ground, you probably got the best feel, and I don't want to, as I mentioned, cause any waves. So let me know. From that sensing, if it's really, about or angry or resistant, or maybe we can figure out a way forward. But that's where I kind of stand on this. So.
Oh, no, yeah, and I'm pretty much on the same page with you in that regard. So that we could, there's ways that we can work with it. But again, I just wanted to make sure that they were cool with it. And unfortunately, like I said, they've been binded up with a lot of projects and things that are going on right now in our place. So it was just an immediate answer, because I only spoke to him probably just barely like 5 minutes. So I'm sure that if we had more time to talk about it, he probably would have seen a little bit more of what we actually want to do. But like I said, I can get you the information and try to get the conversation going and seeing what can be done so we can keep our team.
Yeah. Well, the good news, guys, on the upcoming assignment, you already got stuff to put into your force field analysis on the on the risk area. All right. Handling of sensitive information, that's a risk. So, all right. Hey, did any other, Judith, do you have any other comments or questions?
No, sir. Just would like to be part of the team.
Sure. Cameron, you got anything else?
No, I mean, I agree with both you and well, all of us. I would like for Judith to remain on the team as well if we can, make it work.
Okay. Yeah, at some point, you guys probably need to go visit her in Key West, right? Yeah, in Key West.
More than welcome. Yes, sir.
Go down there and celebrate the sunset, and they got some great fishing out there.
Yes, sir. That's all they have, water, fish.
Yeah, and a great drive if you hadn't been down in the Keys. Just driving out there is a great thing. So, not that Arizona's great, right? Okay. Well, thank you very much for hanging on. I appreciate it. And if you would just send me an email, or we can hook up with a phone call and see what the next steps are. And just continue to work together until
Why did that, sir? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
You as well. Good night.
All right.
Thank
Good
you.
night.